So this is a complete video, complete training on chatting, and we're going to see together how we can put it all together. First of all, you should know that chatting represents your income and that you shouldn't neglect this process if you want to earn as much money as possible. So personally, what I recommend is that you do the chatting yourself for 1 or 2 weeks to really get the hang of it and then outsource it to employees. But do it within your agency, don't outsource it. It's really important for you to have some control over it because chatting represents part of your revenue. So if you do this externally, you're leaving it up to someone else to earn you that money, which would be completely negligible on your part. Now let's take a look at how to understand chatting. First of all, you need to know your objective. What's your daily goal? What's your weekly goal too? With this goal in mind, you'll be able to set goals and psychologically try to reach them every time. Secondly, you have to tell yourself that the goal is not to maximize your income on moment T or on day T, but to maximize your income over the long term. So when you're talking to a sub, you say to yourself, I want this guy to give me money over the long term. I want him to give me money a little every day or a little every week, but not all at once. Then, of course, you have to respect your subs, so don't scam them. When you say you're going to send a custom, you really mean it. When you say you're going to make a call, you really mean it, and so on. Don't leave your subs with nothing, don't turn a deaf ear. So you have to do things properly. Next, don't take anything personally. So when you're talking to subs, you absolutely have to detach yourself emotionally. You stay respectful, you stay super nice. The aim is not to take anything to heart and not to give them the right idea. That's really important because these people are going to try to get you angry. That's only going to satisfy them. Next, you need to identify the types of fans. We'll get to that later, but it's extremely important to adapt the discussion structure to a different type of fan. Identify time wasters to avoid wasting time with them so that you can invest your time on subscribers who actually give you money. This maximizes your chances of making money. Next, you'll have to make sure you don't play into the hands of the bad subs. So it comes down to not taking anything personally. Always be polite. Always be smiling, polite, super nice. Always be the perfect girlfriend, in fact. Even if the sub doesn't really deserve it, try to be. Then, during this chatting session, you're going to have to forget all about your fundamental beliefs and values. In fact, you're about to enter a world where people do completely bizarre things, where people behave totally irrationally. And you, as a chatter, are rational. So there's going to be a gap. The aim is not to judge them. The aim is not to get into a phase where you say, yeah, I'm talking to Sims. No, you're not talking to Sims. You're talking to subscribers. You're talking to customers you need to satisfy. This is really important. Forget your beliefs, forget your values, and don't judge them during your session. Because if you do, you're going to lose a lot of energy. And on top of that, you risk having just a bad time chatting. The aim is to make sure you don't have a terrible time either. Now, let's take a look at how to represent your model 100%. First of all, remember that you're responsible for her image and that her image is worth its weight in gold. So don't go selling off prices because you absolutely have to make money. Don't give away free stuff to subscribers. Her image is worth gold. She's given you access to her image. She's given you access to her nudity. Now it's up to you to make good use of it and maximize your earnings on it. Next, you'll need to avoid being negative with subscribers. That's super important too. Always do things properly, as I said before. Don't show negativity, always show sympathy, respect. Next, you're going to need to know the model's limits. You do this in a call or you send a file to the model, etc. with a questionnaire so you know what she's willing to do and what she's absolutely never willing to do. This is really important because when you talk to a subscriber and they ask you for a particular piece of content, you need to know right then and there whether that content could be done or not, because this will prevent the subscriber from buying something for nothing. And it also prevents your model from feeling oppressed. And a model that's oppressed, believe me, in the long term, is very bad, both for you and for the model. Next, you're going to have to do a complete profiling of the model to create a kind of new virtual character. Then you can take the model's tastes directly. That's what I recommend to make it look as natural as possible. Or you can create your own tastes of favorite dishes. As for measurements, don't make them up because they'll show. So use the model's real measurements. If the model doesn't want to share his or her tastes, you can invent musical tastes, you can invent tastes in food and so on. The aim is to create a character and profile all this so that the chatters actually have a file containing all the model's tastes. That way, they can chat and have something to talk about with subscribers. And above all, they can answer subscribers' questions if they're curious. So knowing everything from A to Z is super important. In my Telegram, I'll link you to a questionnaire that you can send directly to your model. So it's an ultra complete and compulsory questionnaire that you absolutely must fill in before launching a chatting session. Now let's take a look at how to build a relationship. First of all, you'll need to set up a greeting message with a video in it. You put a video and a short text of 1 or 2 lines maximum. In this video, you'll have to thank your fans and ask them what they like best about your model. And in fact, this will make them subconsciously think of all the things they like about you and remind them why they came to your Onlyfans or Mime page in the first place. So it's an ultra powerful cognitive bias to set up. And on top of that, it's going to force him to respond to your model. And above all, what's interesting about this is that you'll know what the fan likes about your model. Because even if your model isn't great, if she's not a 10 out of 10, you'll be able to know what the fan likes about you and put that to the forefront of the discussion. Let's say your subscriber says, yeah, what I like about you is your eyes, so you send him photos of your face. If he says, well, what I loved about you was that, well, you send him pictures of underwear or PPVs where we can see your breasts, you know? So that way, you adapt to her taste. Then you have to build up a relationship of trust. To do this, it's very simple. You need to extract as much information as possible about your fan. That means asking questions. Obviously, you don't want it to sound like a questionnaire or an interview. So, during the discussion, during your game of seduction, don't hesitate to extract as much information as possible about his age, his profession, his surname, first name, whether he has a wife, whether he has children, etc. You need to have a profile of the person you're talking to. You need to have a complete profile of the fan in question. And the more questions you ask, the more interested you become in him, the more he'll feel, in fact, on a pedestal, he'll feel unique, in fact. It's going to do his ego a world of good. You're going to inflate his ego, and on top of that, you're going to give him confidence. So that's really important. Next, you'll need to retain as much of this information as possible. So you're going to have to write it down somewhere. There are tools for that. You can take a Google Doc or I don't know, an Excel spreadsheet and write down as much information as you can about that fan. You write down everything from A to Z, his whole life. Once you've extracted as much information as possible, once you've built up your subscribers' confidence, you're going to have to use a very powerful sexual push and pull method. So the sexual push and pull method is basically where you sexualize a conversation and return to a totally banal discussion. For example, your subscriber talks to you about his job, and your subscriber, I don't know, he's a manager in a company and he's got an office. Well, you're going to say to him, oh yeah, and me, if I were his secretary, what would we do on your desk? Or, oh yeah, if I were his secretary, would you mind if I went under your desk? Etc. And immediately after this sentence, you move on to a normal discussion where you ask, and by the way, isn't your job too tiring? See? And in fact, this will arouse a certain emotion in him. And then above all, after he's excited, he'll say to himself, fuck, in fact, go ahead there. All of a sudden, he's back to a normal discussion. It's really going to, in fact, psychologically unhinge him, you know? And in fact, it's going to make him emotional. And the great thing about this technique is that you're going to make him emotional. You're going to make him sensitive and very vulnerable. And as a result, you're going to be able to lead the conversation. You'll also be able to sexualize the conversation and get into a sexual script or sell sex directly. But thanks to this method, you'll be able to dominate the conversation. It's very important to dominate the conversation. And the great thing about the sexual push and pull method is that you can make the interaction natural. So it's super important to make the interaction natural to keep the subscriber coming back. Because if you sexualize too much at once, without extracting information, without doing a push and pull, and without leading the conversation, right away, it can lead to a robotized conversation like he's used to having with hundreds of Onlyfans models, you see? So the goal is to make the interaction natural. Then don't hesitate during the discussion to implement little 2-second videos. It could be winks, lip licks, etc. Yeah, little things like that. Yeah, little things like that. It allows you to sexualize in a gentle way. And above all, to feed your audience's imagination when you're talking to them. Now let's take a look at the different types of subscribers. One thing you should know is that these people are missing something in their lives. And that's it. And your goal is to find out what it is. So generally, these people, they're asexual or gender deprived, you know? So they're missing something. So it's not necessarily sex. We'll see about that later. Don't worry. But they're missing something in their lives. And your aim is really, in a few minutes, come on, an hour max, to find out a little bit about what it is, you know? So obviously they're not going to tell you directly in words, but you have to guess it yourself during the discussion. So it's a bit of psychological work. So there are generally 3 types of subscriber present. You have the fatally lonely men, i.e. people who've had an accident, who've been widowed, who haven't been spoiled by nature, either physically or mentally, who are asocial, etc., etc., etc. So these people, unfortunately, fatally for them, are alone, and there's very little chance of them becoming more alone, in fact. So these people, well, they're going to be the bulk of your subscribers. They're going to represent a good part of your subs. They're not necessarily the ones with the most money, but on the other hand, they're going to represent a bigger part of your subs. So don't overlook them. Then there are the romantic men. Romantic men are people who like variety, who like to indulge themselves, who are greedy for life, who take it in their stride, but who unfortunately feel frustrated. So generally, these are people who aren't alone. They're in the company of a girlfriend or a wife, but unfortunately this wife or this girlfriend, well, that's it, isn't enough for them. So they need to look elsewhere to feed their fantasies. It's very rare to come across them, but it can happen. So they're definitely not to be overlooked. And then there are the men who don't have the time. So generally speaking, they're going to be single working fathers, they're going to be big company bosses, and generally speaking, these people are your good buyers and good tippers. I'd like to make that clear. People who don't have the time, generally speaking, are people who can't build a relationship with someone because they don't want to, they don't have the time, they work a lot, and so on. So generally speaking, you're not going to have too much of a sex talk with these people. For example, it's going to be a single father who needs someone to tell him about his problems at work and his daughter's problems at school, for example. So only with you will he have this kind of conversation, and you'll become a special person for him. He won't sexualize you, he'll feel real love for you. So you absolutely have to target what the person wants as soon as possible to know what type of subscriber it is, you see. So you know the type of subscriber and you know what they want in life, so you can play on that. You can see that she wants fantasy, that she wants a certain, let's say she wants to feed a certain fantasy. Let's say, for example, you see that this person has a certain fantasy about feet, but can't have it with his girlfriend or his wife. Well, you're going to talk about feet. You can see that this man is inevitably lonely, and so he just wants a girlfriend with whom he can supposedly make love digitally. Well, you send scripts and sex. You see, he's a guy, in fact, who just needs someone to talk to about his problems and stuff. Well, you play psychologist, you see. And naturally, these people are going to offer you money, especially over the long term, if you maintain a natural relationship with them. Now, let's see how we can succeed in selling. First of all, you've got 3 cases to consider when making your first sale. You have the perfect subscriber who buys everything. You have the customer who buys the first PPV and then disappears. And then there's the customer who buys nothing. For the perfect customer who buys everything, there's really nothing to say except keep him at all costs. Also, you can raise the price little by little until he objects. So, as soon as he objects, you go back to a normal price. But don't hesitate to raise the price little by little because you can see that he's not putting up any resistance to buying you the least PPV anyway. So, don't hesitate to raise the price, then you have the customer who buys the first PPV and then disappears. Here you have 2 possible scenarios. The first is that you've sent him a PPV for €2, and this is the first time he's bought from Onlyfans or Meme. And at that point he feels cheated and ripped off because he thought he was getting more for that price. So don't panic. At that point what you can do is send him a PPV that's somewhat in line with the theme of the PPV you sent him. A PPV that's not too hardcore either, so as to win back his trust. So you're more likely to get them to come back than if you do nothing or if they just send you messages. Then, the other scenario is the subscriber. He got what he wanted, that's enough for him. So, in this case, you have to wait. So you're going to have to be patient. You're going to have to send back a message to test their interest after 10-15 minutes or so of waiting. Then there's the subscriber who doesn't buy anything. This is usually a time waster. On the other hand, you need to be sure that you've established a relationship of trust with them beforehand and that you've managed to extract as much information as possible from them. So before you know whether it's a time waster or whether he's really not going to buy anything, you need to see in the discussion whether you've handled it well. If you can see that you've handled it well and the guy hasn't bought anything after 10 sessions, 2 scripts, etc., well, that's a time waster. You can still talk to him from time to time, but frankly, I wouldn't recommend it because it's going to be a colossal waste of time. You have to realize that a discussion takes time and energy, so it's better to invest that time and energy in good buyers or good tippers, or future good buyers or future good tippers. Now, let's talk about the script. Earlier, I talked a little about the discussions to be had, etc., how to bring all this about, how to succeed in maintaining a relationship of trust with your subscriber. Now let's see together how we can monetize it. And in fact, what will represent your income will be your scripts. You'll need to use them once you've established a good relationship with the subscriber. You're going to have to create a story and a place. For example, it's going to be Netflix and chill, in the shower or in bed, in a car, in a parking lot, etc. You'll need to give the impression that the content was made especially for the sub at the moment. And to do that, you'll have to prepare a series of contents in advance with the same outfit, the same location, etc. to really create a spirit around that particular script. The aim, if you like, is to prepare, for example, 2 or 3 photos and 4 or 5 videos in a row with a certain continuity and above all, a story around it all. So prepare all this in advance. Then you need to prepare several scripts that respond to several fantasies. I strongly recommend this too. It could be a foot fantasy, an ass fantasy, a breast fantasy, a fellatio fantasy, etc. So don't hesitate to prepare several scripts. So don't hesitate to prepare lots of scripts that will respond to this type of fantasy. Then each time you need to adapt the textual content of the script to the discussion. What I recommend when you're making a script is that you don't necessarily write the script. you just prepare the content in advance. Afterwards, you can create a textual structure. There's nothing wrong with that. But on the other hand, for each discussion, you have to rewrite all the time. Because if you don't rewrite, unfortunately, it can sometimes show. And then when you rewrite, you force yourself to adapt to the conversation, which will make it feel much more natural and give you a better chance of selling your PPVs. If you ever see that your subscriber really wants a particular piece of content, you can skip content and offer them what they want directly. If you continue with the script, despite the fact that the guy says yes, but I want to see the blowjob, I want to see the blowjob, you risk losing him. Because at no point is he going to buy the other PPVs you send him before that. So don't hesitate to skip steps and send him what he really wants, especially if he insists on the request. After that, if he doesn't insist too much and if he sees that he's getting into your game, don't hesitate to sell him other PPVs first. As far as structure is concerned, what I generally do is to start by sending free content. So it might be an introduction to the story. Then I send another free content where there we make an introduction to something a little higher. So that's it. So generally, when we send a free content, a presentation of the story, it's going to be a question, and we try not to be too explicit about it. We're not going to send straight out, yeah, do you want Netflix and chill with me? Not at all. We send a little open-ended question, a little question where you really want to click to see what it is, and then once the guy receives the free content and watches it, he'll be hooked. He's going to need to know what's coming next, etc., etc. Make the content digressive from the softest to the hardest, increasing the price little by little each time. So that obviously triggers a psychological bias in the fan to say, now that I've bought a first PPV at Juru, I can buy a second at Juru, then a third at Juru, etc., etc. The aim is to trigger, in effect, the first purchase. And once you've triggered the first purchase, it's going to be much easier to sell much more expensive PPVs afterwards. Then, once you finish the script, feel free to finish with a completely abused orgasm. So this type of PPV can go for up to X of RO, depending of course on the portfolio you have in front of you. So it's a way of completely satisfying the subscriber. He'll say to himself, fuck yeah, I've managed to make her come. Digitally of course, so he'll be loyal. And then at the end, you can thank them with a little video or photo, same thing. He'll feel really, really good. He'll say, damn, I've managed to satisfy her. And that'll win his loyalty all over again. And he'll want to do it again. You have quite a few examples of script pricing. For example, for 3 videos, you can do this type of script for a total of 150 for a 3-video script. If you have 6 videos, you do 30, 45, 60, 75, 80, 90. In total, you'll have 380 in revenue. These are just a few examples. As far as the scripts are concerned, I wouldn't recommend putting in more than 6 videos because that could be a bit long. The aim is to finalize the script and build customer loyalty. If you don't manage to finalize the script, you're less likely to win the customer's loyalty. So, the aim is to finish the script with the customer so that they're satisfied. And when you give a script to a customer, for example, the next time you give him a script, you increase the price. And the aim is to arrive at prices that are completely excessive. On the other hand, if ever the customer objects to the price, don't hesitate to go back to a slightly more sensible price. So, in terms of messages, start with a question, as I said. For example, how do you like my dress today? Do you think I'm beautiful in this position? That way he'll be curious. As far as PPVs are concerned, when you send out a PPV in relation to your script, you always manage to arouse curiosity in your subscriber. For example, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm doing this. What the hell is she doing? I want to click and see. What do you mean? What am I doing? Don't be too explicit in what you say. When describing a PPV, play the mystery. For example, do you think you could take me all night if I'm in this position, etc.? This will really arouse curiosity. That's really going to make people want to click on the PPV. As I said, it's really important to personalize your messages every time. And ask questions often to create a game with your subscriber. And above all, to lead the discussion. You dominate the discussion, not the other way around. Now, let's take a look at pushes and copywriting. When I say push, I mean mass messages. First of all, you need to be aware that you absolutely must not neglect this stage. It represents a major part of your income. And you're going to have to take your inspiration from Filmix. So why? And subscribe to the best Onlyfans models. So why should you take inspiration from Filmix? Well, you're going to have to create stories from the pushes and the copywriting you're going to put in place. To do this, you'll first attach a GIF or a free video to the PPV. That's it. So, from this message. So, just the padlock. We've realized that it doesn't arouse curiosity at all. The guy gets a text and a padlock, it doesn't actually excite him. So, the text can be really sexualized, etc. It might turn him on. From a cognitive point of view, a padlock and a text don't turn anyone on. So that's that. So this method of sending a free video with the PPV doubles the conversion rate. Obviously, when it comes to text, you have to apply yourself. Avoid the flood of emojis I've shown you in the next image. Here we see that there are too many emojis. You can see that the text is far too long. The text shouldn't be more than 2 or 3 lines long, no more than 2 or 3 lines, and avoid flooding it with completely abused emojis like that. So, obviously, when you send out your PPV story, you need to arouse curiosity without being too explicit about what you're doing. For example, you're not going to say in detail how the person owes himself, does he scream, etc. You even need to keep as much mystery as possible. For example, you're going to describe a story. So for example, you've got an 18-year-old model who lives with her in-laws. Well, you're going to write, my stepfather comes home just as I'm masturbating. Did I get caught? Because if I get caught, I'm going to have to stop OnlyFans completely. And here, in fact, the good thing about it is that we haven't completely described what she does in terms of masturbation. We haven't described how she dresses. We haven't described all that because it's all very platonic. It can be exciting, but it's hyper-platonic. So there, we described a story. We described an atmosphere, you know, and then right away you get caught up in it. You feel like you're about to watch an X-rated movie. It can really turn the audience on, you know? So it's got nothing to do with platonically explaining how she's dressed, how she screams, how she acts, etc. Here we're explaining a story. Here we're explaining a story. You have other examples of stories too. For example, the guy who knocks on the door when the person is pleasuring himself, or the moment when the person is undressing. These two can be easily set up, so these are just examples. You have tons and tons of different stories that you can set up depending on your model's niche. So there you have it. Always differentiate yourself from the others. That's hyper important. And tell a story, because the competition is fierce. Now let's talk about dick rating. Dick rating is also part of something quite popular on Onlyfans. So it's an offer that's become completely unavoidable. There are 2 types of offer. You've got the text, which generally costs between 30 and 5 euros. Then there's the video, which costs between 100 and 300 euros. I'm obviously talking about pre-prepared dick ratings here. So when the guy asks you for a custom dick rating, you've got to really talk about his dick. Don't pick up a ready-made dick rating text. Don't. Because you'll actually feel it. You've got to really talk about his dick, detailing as much as possible everything that's visible. The glands, the urethra, the balls, the veins, the color, and so on. You'll have to sexualize yourself at the same time as describing, for example, oh, your dick leans forward. Perfect for doggy style. Your cock leans back. That's perfect for my G-spot. That's going to please you enormously. You see, the goal is to sexualize as soon as you describe. When you make your dick rating video, because it's a video, you have to adopt a fairly naughty position while making the video. What I recommend, for example, is a position that works a lot, which is on your stomach with your feet up. You can make a video in this position, holding the phone while looking at your subscriber's cock. It'll look completely natural and it'll turn you on. Of course, the aim is to be constructive too, not to hesitate to criticize points that can be changed. Hair, for example. If your subscriber has a lot of hair, your model can say, but you see, I'd have preferred you to have less hair, for example. That'll turn me on even more. Or it could be hygiene. If you see that, for example, there's smegma or stuff like that, the model might say, oh yeah, that's too bad, it doesn't look very clean. I'd have preferred it to be cleaner. Now, that's constructive stuff about things that can be changed. Don't criticize things that can't be changed, for example. That, on the other hand, is fatal. Don't criticize things that can't be changed, like genetics. We'll say, for example, if the guy has an extremely thin dick and an extremely large glans, you're not going to say, fuck, that's funny. You've got a very thin dick and an oversized glans. It looks like a mushroom. You're not going to review like that. Just criticize what can be changed. When it comes to size and thickness, you can play on terms to put in place. For example, if your audience has a dick that's really big, then that's super easy to describe. You can play on that completely. You can say, I love big dicks. Your dick is going to destroy my pussy. Well, there you go. Clearly, it's pretty simple to set up. If she's an average size, then you can just say she's a perfect size and that's exactly the size you need for your pussy. And then, if it's small, then you can say, so, when I say small, it's not mini dick because I know there are guys who suffer from a disease. I can't remember the name, but it's a disease that makes them have a really tiny dick, like microscopic. So if he ever has a mini dick like that, you're not going to say that, but if he ever has a slightly below average dick, there you can say his dick is a perfect size because you have a very shallow pussy. You can also talk about firmness. For example, if your audience has half a dick, you can say that you like flexible dicks because they're more convenient to suck. That's it. You can also talk about color, as I said before, moles, and so on. In short, all the details are good. Of course, the aim is always to be gentle with your words and always score above 6 or 7. And of course, point out areas for improvement to encourage you to do a video again later. For example, you've got a lot of hair. It would have been nice if you'd had less, if you like. This will encourage the guy to do another dick rating and shave. See? Now, let's see together the taste of the lesser and the taste of the tipper. These are the people you're going to have to really invest your time in. Because they spend the most, you're going to have to remember all the little details. Their birthday, their child's birthday, their wife's hobby, their dog's name, and so on. You need to know everything about their lives. Thanks to this, you'll build a deep relationship with these spenders. You'll be able to build a deep relationship with these spenders. As I said before, write down every detail of their lives. To do this, you can either use an Excel spreadsheet or a document, or use Insight tools directly. You can give nicknames to your subscribers. This will really help you create a strong bond with them, because when you give nicknames to someone, or when someone gives you nicknames right away, there's a closeness that's created. So obviously, the nickname has to be miglorative, or has to be a nickname you can use when you're in a relationship. Don't use a nickname to make fun of him. That would be completely counterproductive. Thanks to this, you'll have a natural relationship with this customer. When you have a natural, deep and sincere relationship with a customer like that, they'll naturally give you money. For example, during a discussion, you say to yourself, I'd love to buy that dress, but it's too expensive. Let's say it's a Chanel dress at 600 euros. If you've ever had a good relationship and you're faced with a spender who has money, chances are he's going to say, how much is it? I'll give it to you. It'll make me happy. At that point, you're no longer entering a transactional system but a relational one, as if you were his girlfriend and he wanted to spoil his girlfriend. Generally speaking, it's with them that you make your sales. It's the Pareto principle. So, 20% of your subscribers are going to offer you revenue, and these 20% are the good buyers and the good tippers. It's always better to increase your prices over time, especially for a good buyer. If the numbers are stagnant, the business is dying, so you have to keep growing. Of course, you charge more for customs than for pre-recorded videos. And above all, when you send out a PPV, don't hesitate to increase the price at the next PPV. For example, first PPV at 300 euros, increase by 50 euros the next, and so on, until you reach completely insane prices. Of course, keep GBs and GTs in separate lists. That's really important. My advice is to make 3 separate lists. A list of customers who spent between 0 and 100 euros, a list of customers who spent between 100 and 500 euros, and a list of customers who spent more than 500 euros. This will allow you to segment your customers into low, medium, and high spenders. And thanks to this, you'll be able to adapt your conversation and above all, prioritize conversations with certain customers and charge more according to the list. The more you get a subscriber to spend, the more addicted they'll become. That's the investment principle. That's why you shouldn't hesitate to raise prices, and that's why you shouldn't hesitate to sell all the time, all the time. Obviously, I'm not asking you to become a supermarket. The aim is to maintain a good relationship. But when you're in the sexting phase, when you're in the scripting phase, don't hesitate to send. You shouldn't hesitate to charge. So, also, categorize people according to their fetishes, and don't hesitate to charge a lot for those too, because fetishists generally have trouble finding, they have trouble satisfying their needs with models, and you're one of the few models who can satisfy their fantasies, so you can afford to raise your prices on that too. Now, let's take a look at time wasters. It's super important to identify them, as I said, so as not to waste time with them, because believe me, time wasters are a huge waste of time and energy. How do we identify them? If they don't buy anything after 2 scripts, they're officially a time waster, especially if they don't even buy a $10 PPV. If they won't even buy a $10 PPV, if you've lowered the price all the way, if you've slashed the price and yet they won't buy, and on top of that, you've been careful to build up a relationship of trust with them, to find out what's missing in their lives, to find out what type of customer they are, and yet they haven't bought anything after 2 scripts, then you're a time waster and it's not your fault. Of course, you'll have to make sure you've done your homework beforehand. But if you've done the work before and he buys after 2 scripts, he's a time waster. Despite the fact that you didn't use 2 scripts and just sent a PPV, if after 7 days he hasn't bought any PPV from you, he's a time waster too. Generally speaking, these people talk a lot, they like to talk a lot. They're not necessarily poor people, they don't necessarily have any money, but they just don't feel like spending any money. They'll never do it in their lives. It's really important to identify them again so that you don't waste any more time with them and so that you can focus on the real spenders. That's it, I've finished this training course on chatting. I hope you enjoyed it. In any case, thank you so much for staying until the end. Thanks to this video, you'll be able to really increase your income on your platform. That's really important. In my Telegram, I'll give you an example link to a script I'm using. It's an example, of course. You'll have to adapt the script to your model. There's also the profiling questionnaire for the model, which I'll also put on my Telegram. There's also an example of decreting. Here too is an example of decreting for a particular CID. You'll have to adapt. This will give you the structure. Each time you'll have to make a decreting yourself according to your customer's outfit, of course. I'll put all this on my Telegram so that you have the structure and so that it can help you as much as possible. That's it. I'll say ciao now and good luck for the rest. Bye for now.